are listening to Proof of Love with Tatiana Moreau's Dr. Stephanie Murphy and Lauren Kasovitz. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on Proof of Love is intended as financial advice, legal advice, therapy, or really anything other than entertainment. Please take everything that you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're hearing us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on, or of any of the sponsors or affiliate products that you may hear about on the show. Now that that's squared away, let's start the show. Show me your heart. I know that it's beating. Tell me that you love me too. So I know your heart is true. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. And here we go.
And I'm doing my backup recording.
Awesome. Thanks, girl. Okay, so hello, everybody, and welcome to Proof of Love, the show that teaches you how to love with an open heart and stop being a crummy, miserable, closed-off person. Thank you for joining us today.
It's a little bit different every time.
I'm trying things out. For those of you who are just tuning in for the first time, my name is Tatiana Moreau. I'm a singer-songwriter, activist, cryptocurrency person, podcaster, and overall lover of humanity. And, I'm joined with a couple of my friends. We don't have Lauren with us, Lauren Kasovitz, who's normally with us. She's flying today. But I am joined by the beautiful Dr. Stephanie Murphy. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for that lovely introduction. I feel so welcome. Hi, I am Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and I love to talk about relationships on the internet.
Do they only have to be relationships on the internet, or can they be in person as well?
They can be out in person as well, but I talk about them on the internet as well as in person, because I do this not just on the podcast, but all the time.
Oh my God, you just flipped it around on me. Very good. So Stephanie and I are very, very excited because today's show we're having Ben Tantra Punk come on, and he's going to talk to us about tantric sex, female ejaculation, and all things juicy and exciting. No pun intended.
Yeah, that pun was a little bit intended, I think.
That was a little gross. But welcome to the show, Ben. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, you dear beloved goddesses, for having me on to talk about these lovely subjects. It's such a blessing, and I've been looking forward to it for a long time. Thank you.
Well, we're super psyched about it.
Yeah, doesn't it feel great to be called a goddess? Like, when was the last time someone called you a goddess, Tatiana? It should happen more often.
I know. I don't really know the last time, frankly.
Wait, when was the last time someone acknowledged the truth of your goddesshood?
Well, just
like that.
Yes, that's true. I need more of that in my life.
Put a sticker on the mirror in the bathroom, how about?
That's true.
That's like an affirmation. That's great. That's great.
Start with that. We've been giving people little mini manageable homework assignments. So what would that entail? Like putting a post-it up that says "You are a goddess."
Yeah, there's got to be an app for it. There's got to be a goddess app somewhere.
I'll do their homework for them. Right now, all of you listening who consider yourselves, who identify with the feminine in any way, you are a goddess. You are a divine creature of light, and you are loved. You are accepted. How's that? Beautiful. All you have to do is just play that back a couple of times.
That was perfect.
Breaths and with your eyes closed, and all the miracles will happen.
Cool.
Right on. Okay, so yeah, Ben was saying that he listened to some of our previous shows from Proof of Love, and that he was really resonating a lot with especially what we talked about with attachment theory, and that it was related to some of the stuff in Tantra. So I want to talk about that. But first, like, Ben, if you could just maybe give people an overview. Like, they've probably heard of, like, oh yeah, I think Sting was doing this thing where he said he could have an 8-hour orgasm. Is that what Tantra is all about? What actually is it for someone who has really no idea?
Well, and also, can you say why you're qualified? Because people don't know Ben. We know that he has his Ben Tantra Punk website, and he has a bunch of different content on there. But just so people know, why are you qualified to talk about this? Or you just got a guy that likes to do it a lot?
That's a good question. Well, actually, on paper, I have completed a tantric counselor certification training with the Tantra Quest School in San Diego, and the story of that school is really amazing. I'll save it for another time, but it's basically the story of an ex-military sharpshooter who was doing the sort of Jedi remote viewing Project Jedi type stuff, and was a real ascendant master in the martial arts realm. And he had some epiphanies that opened his eyes and his mind and his heart to becoming a warrior defender for the goddess and for goddess temples. And he's actually an expert sexual healer, and he can tell you all about female ejaculation. And I had the blessing to seek him out, and the blessing of a benefactress of mine. She actually paid for me, a woman who I was doing sexual healing work on. She paid for me and sponsored me to go through that training so that I would be able to have the pride of having a certificate, which is actually kind of, when I went to him, I said, hey, I want to learn this by the book. I know you're a military man. I know you're going to teach the procedures and the protocols. I don't want to be in some wishy-washy kind of woo-woo sort of way of approaching this. I want to know the technicalities and really the mechanics of it. And he was like, well, sorry, it doesn't work that way. This is a feminine yin Shakti tradition, and it's mostly word of mouth. And the more rigid it becomes, the more masculine becomes, and that's where you get this war between the tantrics and the yogis and all of the invaders that came into India and said, this is way too mushy. You need to be, more authoritarian and more violent and more aggressive. So we get into this deep, long-lasting, several century religious war. That's the war between the masculine and the feminine, and it all starts in the bedroom. So I don't know if that helps put things in context, but there's a lot of rabbit holes in this world for sure.
Okay, so it's an ancient tradition. I mean, who invented it, or who developed it or discovered it?
Well, this is where it gets extremely academic, and there's a lot of debate as to which sort of lineages of this tradition start in even all the way back to Egypt. There's an iconography in Egypt about sexual energy transmutation, and in other words, using sexual energy consciously in a ritual format with yourself, with an individual, or with a couple partner, and then in groups. And it sort of scales up in intensity and power the more attention and consciousness and ritual you place into harnessing the orgasm mutually and in groups, and actually programming that orgasmic energy to move mountains. And some people would say build pyramids, or to build temples. And so even people say the Druids were using sex magic, ritual sex magic. So it's really a global indigenous pagan template of more open and free sexuality and spirituality, where people were hacking and reverse engineering the nervous system and figuring out how to really design with this orgasmic energy without this shroud of shame and this patriarchal limiting of the feminine sexual essence. And men were being trained, and men were becoming masters of their sexual energy. So what we say when we talk about Tantra in the modern world, we're really talking about a amalgamation of Chinese traditions, of South Asian traditions, of African traditions, and just like languages, they pick up different elements over time. There's different temple burnings and book burnings, and we've lost more than we can even imagine. When I was actually thinking about it recently, how when the 2012 phenomenon was really coming around, many years ago now, a lot of people were wanting to read the codices of the Mayans and try to understand what was going on and what their thinking was around the calendar and around these shifting ages and earth changes. And we just have so little living records because of the conquest and colonization, and just literally in certain instances, just like with Tantra, just like with a lot of different spiritual technologies, when a monotheistic conquering force comes in to impose a new religion, they wipe out a lot of that. So it's really it's an archaeological sort of Indiana Jones adventure to try to get to exactly where the origins begin. But what we have are these things called tantric scriptures, and there's countless tantric scriptures, and that doesn't even scratch the surface of all the word of mouth lineages. But really, there's places still in India where it has survived in some places very well, and then in Nepal and Tibet. And actually, you could say that the most famous living tantric master guru is the Dalai Lama himself, who is preserving some of the most ancient tantric texts translated over the last several centuries in response to, again, waves of colonization. So it's such an adventure to study it, just and from an academic sense. But if you,
okay, but for what is the point of it, or the goal? Like, is the goal to harness sexual energy to accomplish things, or to give yourself sort of sexual superpowers, or to reach enlightenment, or maybe all of the above?
You just said meditation,
where there's no goal.
you actually pretty much said it all right there. There's people, and it's shifted over time in different contexts, but really, if you can imagine that in the simplest, or the broadest sense, we're expanding consciousness, and that would be the actual, there's debates over even the Sanskrit translations, whether it means a weaving loom, or whether it means the actual notion of just expanding consciousness, expanding energy. But for the purpose of this conversation, really, we can think of it as we are at a level of consciousness, absolutely undeniably one intertwined, co-mingled conscious entity that some people would call God, and there's various pathways to it. And there's basically two approaches in the world. There's an ascetic approach of going into a cave and meditating by yourself and separating from your body and your senses and trying to deny the flesh. And that would be the ascetic path to enlightenment, or to achieving the powers of connecting with the divine. And then what the tantrics, really around the medieval era of India, is where it got to be really popular. And some people would say it was like Berkeley 1960. It was like Berkeley in the 60s, when female initiates, they were learning how to basically hack the Brahmin class, and they were going against the caste system, and they were saying, we need these warrior men, we need our husbands, we need our children to be more imbued with the divine feminine essence, and so we're going to help train them to become real masters of their feminine side. And in that process, they've discovered that they could accelerate what the yogis and mystics were trying to achieve by themselves, which is the enlightenment, which is bliss, which is samadhi, which is the highest state of connectedness to God. And they discovered that when you do this in union, involving the pleasures of the flesh, you actually rapidly, really exponentially accelerate the process, and you get the results. So if you could imagine, there's all these happy lovers bouncing around, frolicking in the light, and then you have these frowning, frustrated yogis twisting themselves in knots, trying to access the divine by themselves, and they're just disgruntled. And so it's always been a transgressive discourse of resistance against the patriarchal religious tendencies, and we can thank the goddess for that, and we can thank really the villager, pagan, deep indigenous goddess worshipping traditions. And in India, the archaeology goes back at least 20,000 years, and that's way before agriculture, way before any civilization on earth, and that is just people worshipping the earth mother goddess, and with psychedelic plants, and that it was an interesting intersection. I mean, I guess I could go off and I could get deep in the rabbit hole. So
no. I have something I want to say. And Tatiana, feel welcome to jump in if you have any questions. But I'm just struck by how different this is, like how much the Western world in particular really kind of needs this to balance out the ideas, the cultural ideas and the beliefs that we have around sex. Right? Because it's so different than like the way that we grow up. There's all these ideas. For example, like, a lot of people in America now, after the internet's come out, grow up watching porn. Right? And the type of sex that's portrayed in porn is, you can make the argument that it's fantasy, right? It's not exactly like real sex, but there's not a lot of discussion about it. There's a lot of shame around sex. There's a lot of, like in religious traditions, like, the priests are not allowed to get married and things like that. They're not even allowed to have sex with a wife because they're not allowed to have a wife. And sex is considered kind of dirty or shameful. Definitely not a path to enlightenment. If it's anything, it's just like a fun thing, get your rocks off and go to sleep or something like that. Right. And there's this focus too on like male pleasure, right? Where there's not so much of a focus on female pleasure. A lot of women don't even know how to masturbate or how to have an orgasm, and they can't tell their partners what to do because they don't know themselves.
Right.
And there's this real suppression, I think, of the power of female sexuality, because people, I think, throughout history have been scared of the power of female sexuality and they want to control it. Would you agree with that, Ben? And tell me how Tantra philosophy is different than the ideas that we as Americans or Westerners grow up with about sex.
I 100% agree with all of that. And in my life history, I've encountered all of those tragic moments, from premature ejaculation to not knowing how to please a woman, and there being a frustration with that, and seeing the even my own virginity and a lot of people's virginity. It's a really botched ceremony, and that can really set
a botched ceremony. Yeah, that pretty much describes mine.
and it sets you up for having a record scratch, and really your most formative sexual experiences really wire you for the rest of life. And that's where fetishes come from. And I'm not to say that that's bad, but it is something to understand about how we're not doing a really sacred ceremony around our sexual energy and our sexual education. And we're not connecting it to the sort of, the divine influences that would keep us safe, keep us harmonious, keep us benevolent. And that's where a lot of that violence and a lot of that abuse comes in, is in the sort of absence. And I say that in my sort of metrics, I would just say that evil fills a vacuum of love. So if you don't become a master of cultivating the love energy, and you go into a sexual encounter, whether you're on drug, whether you're intoxicated, or in even a bad mood. I mean, people say that angry sex, you're basically generating more of that vibration. You're creating things when you arouse yourself, and when you are engaged with another person. So the consciousness that's needed around that, we'll definitely get into that. So I totally agree. And then this is a perfect segue to something I wanted to share, which is basically my sort of tantric miniature white paper that indicts these problems and actually provides this sort of simple, elegant, technical solution, using things that we wouldn't necessarily know to put together, the spirituality and the sexuality. So if you don't mind, I'll just read this little rhyming hymn that I wrote. That's one of my tracks, actually. I'm a musician as well.
Yeah.
And so I will go ahead and put this out. Yeah. So this should translate pretty well, and also answer some of your questions. So it goes like this. Patriarchy has denied, shamed, and brutalized. We must resacralize our body temples as divine. Chakras are aligned, connecting earth and sky. Holy serpents rise, worship them with pride. Sit on his lap, legs around his back. Look into his eyes, breathing synchronized. Cycle up the spine, the energy inside. Open your third eye, DMT will flood your mind. If you want to see the light, you must last all night. Pray between her thighs, meditate while you're inside.
Oh my God, that is so beautiful. I love that. I think we should introduce the show with that.
Please go for it. Yeah. So you can see, if you deconstruct that and reverse engineer it. The
hippie applause.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the twinkles and the, yeah, thank you. So I was about, I don't know, maybe 5 years into my journey, and that was about 5 years ago, where my studies had led me to I pretty much woke up in a state of, I call it medibation, masturbation and meditation. It's easier, people make excuses why they don't have time to meditate, but I guarantee they're not going to, well, most people, especially men, are not going to forget to set aside time to masturbate. So if you put the two together, then your stacking functions get the best of both worlds. So during a morning session of meditation, I pretty much got hit in the crown chakra with what some people call a Buddhic insight, where you get a complete download of words or a math problem solution, or whatever it is. It's probably how Bitcoin appeared too. It's just a complete download at one point, waking up or in some hypnagogic state, and I was able to just put this together and synthesize it. And I'd love to hear what questions come up or what feelings come up for you all around what I shared in that piece.
I have something that I was thinking of earlier while you were saying about how women need men to have a more feminine energy and blah, blah, blah. So most women that I know do not want to be screwed gently. They just don't. 95% of the women that I talk to, when you involve some alcohol, we all rejoice when a man just takes us and throws us around. Would you posit that that is because of social conditioning, or would you say that that is a misconception of what tantric would be, that you can or cannot fulfill that? Like, where do you stand on that? Because I know a lot of women, and they don't really want it to be very gentle, particularly.
Right. Well, it's actually, I would say it's the gentleman warrior, to have you want to be strong and you want to be able to take a woman there. And it really is about the divine masculine, and the male project in this is to control and master his own ejaculation so that he can last long enough to do the jackhammering when she wants it, and to do the emotive caring when she needs it, and to have that, I mean, when you have the best of both worlds, when you can nibble an earlobe and whisper sweet nothings while you were jackhammering for as long as you want to and as long as she wants to, and also change it up, that's the mastery that the skill you would want to have. And I make a joke about how, we're paying boxers, tens of millions of dollars to punch each other in the head repeatedly, ongoingly, until one of them falls over. But I guarantee, to celebrate the winner that night when he goes home to his wife, she knocks him out in 30 seconds. So there is an asymmetry in they call it the orgasm gap between the female physiology and arousal cycle, which takes 30 to 45 minutes to even get fully engorged in all of that tissue, versus the male arousal cycle, which takes, as we know, seconds to complete the cycle of getting off. And so that is where we need, and what Tantra really is. And I interviewed a man, Kai Corell, and he went to India just in his modern life, and can speak from his direct experience of going to a tantric goddess temple and having female priestesses initiate him in these arts that would allow him to bring his highest, most powerful masculine to the bedroom, but have it interwoven with the goddess, so that the woman is not feeling like she's being jackhammered by a soulless, demonic, sort of negative, evil, unprocessed. Like, you don't want to have sex with your lover and all of his corporate higher ups in the food chain of his workplace, and you don't want him using your yoni or your vagina as a trash compactor for all of his bullshit.
Wow.
So you want him to clean that out, and it's the goddess work. And it's like, do you want to be danced in past the threshold into the bed and then ravished with like a pure-hearted man who's totally connected to God? Or do you want a guy who's just like just dumping all of his unprocessed childhood baggage and his past relationship trauma and anger? And that's where we really don't do the purification, the yogic purification in between relationships, to give each other our best. When we go around, that goes back to the relationship advice and the attachment theory stuff. And so it's really practical. I mean, I know, some of this language is really flowery and really sort of hypnotic, and I guess I would say it's scriptural. But when you get down to the practical aspect of it, which is what modern people can handle, not a lot of people are going to want to get into these deep, meditative, prayerful states. But you really don't have to get the juice out of it, if you just know the mechanics of what it takes to train a man to last longer, and to do some basic practices to bring his highest and best self to the bedroom every time, and not getting lazy.
I really like the way you said that, Ben. If I'm having sex with someone, I do want them to bring their best self to the bedroom. And there's a lot of work involved in that, I think, that takes place outside of the bedroom, right? Right. It's not all just practicing sexual exercises. It's about knowing yourself, right? And knowing your past trauma and healing from it, so that, like you said, you're not dumping it onto your partner or acting out unconscious stuff on your partner. So Talk a little bit about that. Like, how do people get started, I guess, growing or developing themselves, or dismantling limiting beliefs that contribute to them not being their best self in the bedroom?
Well, there's a few very practical tips that I learned very early on in my first trainings with tantric masters, and I've really been blessed to work with mostly women of color, mostly Indian women, some of them born and living out their full lives in India and coming to the West and bringing their teachings. And I've been able to really I would say be super blessed by the integrity and the authenticity of the lineages coming through me, the transmissions that have come to me. And that's stuff that money can't buy often. And people will spend lots of money traveling the world and maybe end up having even worse encounters and worse experiences. So I would say I'm I've had a blessed and gifted journey, and it's my goal to make that, the rarity of that journey be more accessible and more easy to connect with, and really mainly because a lot of times women will end up seeking men who are on this path, and they go to a meetup and then they have a really bad experience where they feel like just negative energy they're being exploited by their openness and vulnerability. So there's an extreme duty of care, extreme due diligence that needs to be done to make sure that when we're opening up these places of trauma and bringing new energy in to flush them out, that we're not re-traumatizing and actually polluting them even worse. And so there's a lot of that's kind
so
of
what you're saying is there's a lot of potential creepy weirdos who are going to tantric meetups saying, "Oh yeah, I can take you on a spiritual journey, baby." Just come with me.
Exactly.
Be aware of that.
It's a honeypot for wounded people and for predators, for sure. And so that's why, to me, I trust the women in these lineages who have been really connected to what we call sadhana, which is the practice of ritual goddess worship, where you're saying, I'm going to sit down and repeat these mantras and work with a guru and do the sort of, that's the more technical, by the book, traditional classical tantric stuff, which is that we're playing with fire here, and we're all children. I mean, think about how many years we're alive on this planet relative to the number of years that human culture has existed and evolved, relative to the number of years that life in the cosmos has evolved. So our little flickerings of a life experience, we need to be careful what we dabble with and who we accept training from. That is all to sort of preface the bowing down that I do to my teachers and my masters. And so a few of the things that they really set me up with right early on about just love and relationships, which we're all going to have for the most part, is that one of the things was that you need to be selective with your partners, because if you appreciate the scope of magical potential that you have co-creating together intelligently with this energy, you can really do a lot of good, you can do a lot of harm. And if you're not conscious about who you're hooking up with, and that's not to slut shame anybody, I'm an ethical slut, whatever. So it's about, you want to choose the people who are having a dharmic, meaning a spiritual sort of life calling, your mission statement together. So if you were to say, okay, we're going to do speed dating, but we're going to collaborate on a mutual life mission statement, and we're going to make that vision board together, and then the alchemy of lovemaking is going to be the fuel that pushes our dreams forward, and we need to be always in alignment about what those dreams are. And if one of us changes, then we shake hands, and we're not attached and addicted and so ruined and miserable inside that we can't just say, hey, this was a great run, we raised a family, our kids are happy and healthy and off to college, now we're on to other things. Or, I mean, it's really more like a DAO. It's really more in the sense of a decentralized, more autonomous, more flattened hierarchy of relating, where you say, we can engage in this technology together consciously, and we can follow certain principles like being selective with partners. And another thing that's so crucial and so simple is set up a place within the home or somewhere that is separate from your normal wear and tear, the treading on of your private spaces. Having separate bedrooms is a good idea. Having separate homes, even, so that you have corners to retreat to when things get too gnarly with just life stuff, happening. So, I mean, to keep a hygienic connection that's not just completely gunked up with daily monotonous sort of drama and bickering and whatnot, in order to have that sacred space, you need to design it as an actual place where you have an altar and you put your symbols of what you're achieving together on the altar. If you want to raise a beautiful family, then conjure some images of where you want to be in the world, where you want to move to. This is all going back to The Secret and all the other magical principles, but sex and magic are the most fun and powerful and amazing things to do. So, getting roofied and waking up in the hospital, that's not the most intelligent thing that either parties are doing, or just hooking up frivolously and having just really having cheap and unsatisfactory sex. A lot of sex addicts and love addicts are just at that level of like, I need validation. Who's going to fuck me at the bar tonight? I'm going to give them beer goggles and we're going to just get this over with. And then I'm going to wake up and have this sort of spiritual hangover and have them. This is where it gets even darker and creepier, is that if we acknowledge the what I would consider the fact that there are a lot of energetic stowaways living in our chakra system, and you could call them chakra parasites, you could call them astral larvae, and you could say that what in the Christian tradition we call demons are actually more like opportunistic parasites that see us bleeding our prana, our spiritual energy, like sharks smelling blood of someone just bobbing in the ocean with a wound. We're constantly bleeding out our wounds into the ether, and there are entities who see our woundedness and they come and they attach to us. And when we have sex with people, even when we make eye contact with people, we're creating a sort of network connection, a TCP IP connection that malware can tunnel through. And so this is really about setting up a VPN on your soul and on your body, and using astral sort of condoms. Really having
you got to strengthen your spiritual immune system, right?
We really do. And that it gets lowered when you have rebounds. It gets lowered when you stay in relationships that are toxic and abusive longer than, so the thing that I think is the archetype that I like to use, like I'm a webcam performer and adult performer, and I'm on Spank Chain, which is one of the best functioning actual use cases of Ethereum smart contracts and state channels. And Amin Soleimani used to work for Consensus and is a high-ranking Ethereum developer. And you can't pretty much go to any self-respecting Ethereum conference or event in the world and not have him telling everyone how it all works, using his use case of this adult webcamming platform, which I'm a performer on. But I want to say that on there, I'm breaking it down to people by saying this is sexual Jedi Knight training. And if you look at the archetype that we all hold, which is to me a modern tantric scripture, that's the Star Wars story about training to become a Jedi master. Well, you use the Force to hold back your ejaculatory orgasm and have multiple higher chakra orgasms. So Yoda may as well have been teaching Luke how to really masterfully pleasure himself in on that planet when they were on there. So
okay, so let's talk about that, Ben. So I've heard this idea, and this actually goes against everything that I've learned from culture growing up about sex. And there's this idea that I've heard of in, I guess, like Chinese spiritual traditions and also Tantra, that when a man has an orgasm and ejaculates, it's taking away power from him. And that's why they want to go to sleep right afterwards. And that this is actually something that's very energetically draining, and you should conserve the amount of times you actually ejaculate. So tell us about that. Where does that idea come from? Do you agree with it? And why would you want to, stop yourself from ejaculating if you are a guy, I guess, or have a male body?
I also, there was another point to that, was that a friend of mine who practices something along these lines, he was saying that the man resents on an unconscious level that he's wasting his seed and it's not going to make a baby. And women, it doesn't matter, because women are just, multi-orgasmic.
They're just trying to get it as much as they can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are great questions and great points. And certainly there is I would call it a multi-orgasmic envy that men experience that makes them obviously just constantly in a state of denial and lying to themselves about how inadequate they are. And really, people are not afraid in these circles to say that we understand that women are sexually superior physiologically to men out of the box and require, some warming up to themselves and that sense of getting to know their bodies. But you don't have to do female-bodied people. They don't have to do this they don't have to do this conservation. The ejaculate can flow freely and abundantly, and there's no real energetic depletion. But for the man, that is, like you're saying, there is, I agree, this conscious and subconscious envy and resentment and sadness about spilling the seed. And really, there's so much deep mythology around this, but I'll get into the questions around just where this comes from and how it was discovered and what the relevance is. So really there's in Hindu Tantra, which is the oldest sort of, I don't want to say, I would say it's the OG, pretty much the OG Tantra, where the goal is, this was more around witchcraft and magic. And there's black magic and there's green magic and white magic and a lot of different, what you could say is that the tantric scriptures are like magical recipe books for sexual witchcraft. And in the best case scenarios, these ceremonies were conducted by women and female gurus, and they were using sexual rituals to push people through taboos and push people through certain boundaries so that they could understand how limitless their potential really is and how boxed in the culture was making them. So the purpose of mastering for the male to master the yoga of his ejaculation orgasm, it was to delay the orgasm so that he could induce enough orgasmic vibration in the lovemaking ritual, so that these really in the sense of like a kundalini, anybody who does kundalini yoga would know that the energetics, the sort of electrical engineering schematic, is about switching on the circuitry of the chakra system, and so that you could have a kundalini activation, and this cosmic goddess energy could uncoil from the base of the spine, and through multiple orgasmic, long-lasting lovemaking sessions where you're synchronizing the breathing and you're doing the eye gazing and you're really doing the visualization and the yogic meditative massage practices, you're going to end up actually activating that energy and having the third eye become activated, the pineal gland. And that is where you start to have these super powers come forth and these magical abilities to see into the past, to see into the future, to actually levitate things. I mean, this is what the yogis are.
To levitate things? Really?
Yeah, teleportation.
Have you levitated anything?
I would say I'm working on it.
He's levitated his penis.
Yeah, that's important. It gets harder and harder to get harder and harder. That's for sure over time, which is another reason, a practical reason why to hold on to your jing. So that kind of segues perfectly, jumping over with that into the Chinese system of sexual kung fu and the Taoist sexual practices, which are, I would say, less ambitious in terms of becoming gods and becoming super powerful magicians, and more about the practical, down to earth, but yet very spiritual and very cosmic sense of health, longevity, wellness, lasting longer, living longer, and being, for a man, really sexually potent longer in life, because they're living longer, because they're healthier. Do they want to spend half their life limp and impotent and useless in bed? No, that's really depressing. And I'd want to. So they knew about herbs. They were using herbs, but most of all, they had this sort of sense that, and this just makes sense biologically for men. You're going to be, and they say in the West, young, dumb, and full of cum. So if you're young, dumb, and full of cum until you're about 35, what are you after that? Old, smart, and depleted of cum. So there's the. There's also the adage that the youth is wasted on the young. So if I would have known what I should have been taught, like Ralph Macchio in The Karate Kid, if I would have had a female priestess come at me like Mr. Miyagi and say, wax on, wax off, this is how you're going to intelligently use your ejaculations, it wouldn't have been to control it and make it stop at the earlier ages of life. It would have been to program it and to have multiple internal orgasms before you ejaculate. But you can't hold back that flow at that age, and that's not really the point. But as you get older, they say, in your teens, you could ejaculate every day. In your 20s, if you can, hold back every other time. 30s every third time. 40s every fourth time. So you're basically you're scaling to and adapting to the natural arc of depletion of your energy, and we can't cheat that. And as men, I think in women, we know it's a sick joke of the gods. Why did you make women get hornier and juicier the older they get, and men get less interested and drier the older they get?
So they match up with the younger men, right? That's
what I say. I say, and Gary Knoll was the one he's like a world famous kind of nutrition, health guru kind of guy from the West, but he got me into Tantra through one of his DVDs. It was called Sexual Healing, and he had some tantric teachers on there. But he was answering questions, I think, from the audience about, hey, or we're an aging couple, how do we spice up the bedroom? And he said, bring in a 20-year-old. And there's something.
Wait, what?
Well, that's actually a great point. I have so many questions, but since
there are so many questions,
and I know you have questions too, Tatiana. But just because you just said that, Ben, what does tantric philosophy have to say about group sex or about non-heterosexual kinds of arrangements? Because I haven't heard much about that. I hear a lot about masculine and feminine, but like, can this work with same-sex couples? Can you do masturbatory tantric activities? Like,
good question.
Have a partner? Mm-hmm. I think there are people hearing this and saying, "Oh, this sounds great, but I'm single. Like, what do I do?"
Mm-hmm. Well, beautiful question. Actually, I'm very deeply immersed in this because I would consider myself 75% straight, 25% gay. And so I actually am blessed to work with men. And I've done a lot of my tantric coaching has been for gay men. And a lot of them adore me. I've done a lot of phone sex. I've done a lot of video online sessions, and I've made some instructional videos as well. And there is a need for more literature on gay tantra, but actually there's a beautiful book that is just called Gay Tantra. I've done a couple interviews on my podcast, and there are definitely beautiful videos out there on some of the tube site. Well, I don't want to give any plugs to any of those sites necessarily, but if you look online, you can see all this stuff in action. And really the beautiful thing about the tantric cosmology of what's called Shiva and Shakti, and Shiva being the divine masculine archetypal energy, mythical energy, and Shakti being the female aspect, is that we all know that we contain both of those polarities within us. And in any yoga class, especially Kundalini yoga, you're going to be trained to acknowledge that you have a left feminine side and a right masculine side, and that the real perfect balance of those internally is what makes you a whole person. And going back to that, the
so
neediness.
Everybody has masculine and feminine energy.
Exactly.
Basically. So even if you have two male bodies or two female bodies, there's still a blend of masculine and feminine energies.
You got it. Yeah, exactly. So, and then in a lot of tantric scriptures and texts, there's actually a divine reverence for those who are transgender and for those who are able to even mix those energies even more easily within themselves. Whereas if you're taking an extremely rigid, totally kind of jockish man who doesn't have any of that yin flowing through him, there's going to be something to be desired, even if he is, even if he is bringing that jackhammering force that you want. You're going to want to have that balance. So yeah.
Yeah, that is my experience. I just have to say, I don't want to get too personal here, but I quickly figured out in my sexual career that those people that are really, really far on the masculine side, often they're not that great in bed.
Yeah.
There was something missing, at least for me, as I guess maybe a bisexual person, someone who's attracted to lots of different genders. So,
nice. Applause.
I like the idea of incorporating masculine and feminine energies even within the same person. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. That we all have different parts of ourselves that are kind of along the gender or energy spectrum.
It's a fractal universe, I would say. And so you can, when you figure this stuff out, and it's the more dialed in you are internally, the less out of balance you are. And so when you take two balanced people together and they can intelligently reverse the polarities on demand and actually say, okay, now I'm going to play this role. And there's a question here from Tatiana about foreplay and lovemaking and magic, and really it is.
I want to phrase that question. I don't want to just, because there's some caveats to that one. So
okay, sure.
Okay, so we still need to talk about group sex and solo sex in Tantra.
Okay, yeah. So, so for which one do you want to start with? I guess we can start with solo and then work our way up to we'll do the asparagus.
Sure. So start with solo. That sounds good. So what if someone's listening to this and says, well, this all sounds great, but I don't have someone that I can gaze into their eyes and make love slowly for hours with. I am single. So what do I do? How can I practice this?
Well, really, actually, it's the eye gazing you can do with yourself in a mirror, and you can actually be your own lover. And the more, I mean, because you want to be, I guess people are walking around with a love deficit internally, and they're seeking to find and basically in a vampiric and parasitic way, they want to suck energy from someone else who already has light flowing through them, which isn't usually ever a good outcome. But when you are able to, and I know you talked about this on your previous podcast about this conundrum of what does it mean to love yourself. And what I would say in order to make it very practical is that you need to massage yourself with coconut oil or sesame oil. You need to romance yourself. You need to create date nights for yourself. And you need to not just, I mean, of course, just jerking off to porn if you're a man, does that look anything like what an actual sexual encounter is going to be like for you and another human being? No, you need to be able to move your hips. You need to be flexible. You need to have energy. You need to not drink a bunch of booze and eat a bunch of food and go to bed late and be totally tanked out so that you can't perform. You got to be thinking of this more intelligently, the way you would think of any other physical activity that is demanding, and that this is the most demanding thing because it requires so much attention. So think about that as just like, if you want to have them, what would be the most beautiful, most powerful, most enriching and satisfying love you could make, and then do that figure out what that is, write it out like a script, and then play with yourself really, and talk to yourself, sing to yourself. And if that sounds crazy, then it's crazier to be depressed and to be suicidal and to be lonely and to
right.
not
No,
feel
it sounds awesome. It doesn't sound crazy. Yeah. It sounds great. I think that is actually part of self-love, right? Yeah. Like we call masturbation as a slang term self-love, but how can you make it as loving as possible? How can you make it really send a message to yourself that you are special, you are loved, and you are perfect the way you are?
And you can set a high standard, and people that do not meet that, if you meet somebody like, I do this better on my own and I care more about myself, and it's like, you're not really adding to this. And when individuals in themselves merge these polarities of energy and have the love and are exuding the love, then really you have to be adding something, adding value. You can't, it's not just out of desperation. So something Vin Armani said, and he was quoting somebody else, but I'll remember him saying it first, was that confidence is a fed tiger. So, and that's a very interesting sort of meditation, because if you think about it, if you go out into the world and you are not secure in yourself and you're not abundant in your own self-loving energy, which to me, I would say it also is deriving from the earth. Like if you go garden and then you go to the temple and you pray to the divine and you maybe work on the garden at the temple, you're going to have these auxiliary inputs of love. So it's really not about it's like the love is not going to come necessarily like it will flow through your cells and it will open your heart chakra, but you want to absorb the ambient loving prana of sacred spaces where people are cultivating this energy, like temples that are sex positive, like tantric temples. You want to go to, a nature park or go hiking and just bring that into the bedroom, and have that be, I would much rather date someone where we went to the temple and had a light meal and then went to on a hike and then made love under the stars after dancing in the moonlight and playing drums together and having some ganja and a medicated ganja erotic massage while you're at it too. How about? So, yeah. So.
Oh, this sounds like a great date.
Exactly. So, juxtapose that to junk food, fast food, violent movies, and some sterile, lifeless box where you can't even make a sound without the neighbors calling the cops. How far are you going to get in this prison paradigm of sexual negativity? That's why I think people want to beat each other over the head with hammers to have an orgasm, because they're so suffocated and trapped in this matrix that they don't get to expand and open up. And I love making love outdoors where you can feel a breeze tickle your asshole and, you're just like getting purified by the wind and you have these vistas. So it's like, there's a lot of, these are very simple, practical. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars to fly halfway around the world to have some guru molest you while you're meditating to figure this out. Really, it's like nature is our best friend here.
It's all good, Ben, until the sand or dirt gets in your funny bits, Yeah,
watch out for that.
Yeah.
Bring a yoga mat, or bring some some blankets, but
Okay,
yeah.
so what about group sex? And then I want to go to Tatiana's questions.
Okay, great. So what about group sex? There's so much to talk about there.
Well, is it something that is even included as a part of a spiritual sexual practice? Can it be between more than two people? Are there special energies that are able to be harnessed that way? And how do you negotiate dynamics of group sex? How do you find people to have group sex with that aren't creepy and weird?
Oh wow, I'm so thrilled to have this opportunity to talk about this, because I was at one of my kind of elite tantric men's group retreat training camps, and there was a day where a whole panel of embodied women came in to sort of school us and what would you rate and rank us for our ability to actually present our best energy to them. So we had to stand before them with no words and just stare at them with as much warmth and divinity as we could, and have them tell us whether or not we were a total creepazoid or not, and whether we were doing the work, and they could feel it. Their energy was pulsed by it.
Oh my gosh, that sounds hard. That sounds
challenging.
Was
intense. Yeah, I think I won the top prize for that one by doing some Jedi sex magic tricks. But I mean, I had this woman having giggle-gasms and just like losing her mind, because I came up and did this Tibetan Buddhist tantric dakini dance, and I kind of did this flowery sort of gaze and pose, and it was great. But back to the question here, one of the things that I said, one of the questions that I had, because all the men got to ask questions of this panel of more advanced women, and my question to them was, why is it that only pimps and porn stars get to have threesomes, foursomes, and moresomes? Why can't the good guys who plant trees and who are healers and who are good Samaritans, why do we get boxed into this really limiting monogamous till death do us part script? And the bad guys, they get all of the bad guys get all the loose women or whatever, so I asked them that, and to your point and to this question, how do you engage in a more sacred, more ceremonial container for having multiple people involved in this work and in this the lovemaking process? And for me, it would be a beautiful thing this is actually the core quintessential function of the tantric sex ritual. It is a group ritual, and the thing is that modern people who are making up this neo-tantra, Western tantra, some people call it California tantra thing, it's like they don't have a spiritual community. They maybe have some friends in a yoga class, but everyone's like doing their lives, and they don't really know each other that well. They're not really a tight-knit sort of village-based community or local community that is very tight-knit. So the bonds are very weak. And so the best a lot of us can do with our schedules and whatnot is just have like a little microcosm of this more elaborate ritual lovemaking just with our one partner. And that's all this. I mean, this whole system is set up to limit our capacity and our time to actually figure out how to have more bonobo-like, more earlier primate-like group sexual social bonding. And that's, people would argue in evolutionary biology that sex for primates, especially bonobos and humans, it's 99.9% about social bonding and resolving conflict, and less than 1% about procreation. In terms of how much ejaculate is produced, how available the female sexual anatomy is to penetration, and this is unprecedented. So we are the make love not war beings, and we're here to explore this stuff, and yet we live in a context and culturally where the Industrial Revolution and the system as we know it has crushed all of that, and the religious systems have crushed it. So, but the real transgressive aspect of the original tantric, it's called a maituna ritual, is that you would have sex with strangers facilitated by your guru. Your guru would pair you either with your lover, your long-term lover, or if that wasn't a good match because you all had gunked up your relationship and it wasn't flowing right, you would probably want to get trained in a group setting, and people have this, or these rituals have this function of rotating partners, which you can see now in a more tame sort of G-rated sense. People will do these what they call puja rituals, where you will have like an inner circle of men and an outer circle of women, and then like a dial of a clock, then you would clap your hands between, it's like musical chairs, and everyone rotates. And
Wow.
mostly it's eye gazing. So yeah, mostly you're going to see people doing this with just, we're going to massage each other's hands one by one and rotate, or we're going to dance in front of each other and do our fiercest, fiery, lover dance for each other. And then by the time you stir up all of these souls, you have what's called an egregor, a group mind field where everybody is entrained, like you would harmonize instruments. Like if you pluck a string on one instrument, it's going to resonate with another instrument. That's the potential that we have in groups as human beings. One individual person is like one string on this sitar, or this like multi-string, this harp, so you can, that's probably a good metaphor. Group anything can take a single string, a banjo, and turn it into a harp. So the instrumentation, the orchestras and the operas that can be conducted when you have a group of people who are entrained and who have the love and the care and the attention and the surrender and the trust that's required to do this without it getting wonky and turning into oh no, I'm the third wheel unicorn, and now my lover's hooking up with someone who's thinner or hotter or whatever, and I'm going to be butthurt and go withdraw. Like, you've got to hedge against all of those tendencies of the ego, and that's where the yogic practices come in. And it's like, I don't want to be intimate with someone who doesn't do any kind of yoga, because then they're not going to have any control over their nervous system when they get triggered emotionally, and they're going to be a train wreck, and it's going to be drama. So like, most people are not going to get past level one of like, okay, everyone's disposable. He pissed me off. I'm ghosting him. I didn't like that text. I didn't like that emoji. Next. And then you're just in this Groundhog's Day of karmic garbage. And so the more the leverage comes in the group rituals, where you can say, we're all going to do our best to show up with like clean bodies if we can, and to know our sexual health histories, and to be very conscious about the STIs that we need to navigate. And there are positions, like a football coach is going to know where to put each person in a design of a play. They're going to make a play, and they're going to know, that's what gurus are meant to do, because they get it. They can see, okay, this person is not doing the work at home, and they cannot be involved in this until we see them progress. And that's the eldership of priestesses and priests. Like, they get it. They see young people coming through their coming of age, and the immaturity that you see, like in Luke Skywalker in the first Star Wars movie. He's very impulsive, very emotionally incontinent, and he can't hold it together. And then you see him come out as a Jedi, and he is so fucking dialed in, and his energy just exudes this self-mastery. And I would say that he is retaining his semen by that point. And then these masters, the elders, Yoga and Obi-Wan, like, they're the ones who could facilitate him learning about sex and being in union with a lover. It's all allegorical to this stuff.
Wow, yeah, there's so much wisdom in here. So most people, Luke, you are not ready yet. Master your Jedi.
That's right.
Force.
The Force, yeah.
Use the Force to train yourself. And by the way, what you said before about the refraining from ejaculation makes a ton more sense. So thank you so much for that, for enlightening me on that topic. I want to make sure we get to the questions that Tatiana has about.
Yes, please.
Like, how is this different? Are you ready, Tatiana, to go ahead with those?
Yeah. So basically, I'm a little bit on the skeptical side. I feel like I don't understand religious people. I don't understand why people pray and why they have these kind of religious experiences and stuff. I mean, so when I think about this and you remove the talking part, right, where you're saying the words of, oh, we worship the goddess, blah, blah, it sounds like people are just making love and having a lot of foreplay, and that the only difference would be that they're gazing into each other's eyes more. So how does that, you know what I mean? Like, if you're not a person that wants to sit and necessarily feels that they're that connected to that, is this even an opportunity for somebody? And how is it different from just a lot of foreplay and regular lovemaking?
That is a great question. I'd say stripping away the all the words and the mythology. If you were just to be watching it like in a Masters and Johnson study, and just from behind that sort of one-way glass or whatever, and you see what's happening there, what would look different, and if you do watch tantric porn, you'll see this, is this cadence of alternation between giving and receiving, and totally giving and totally receiving separately in a ritualized, well, I take away the ritual, just say what you're going to see is that one person goes fully into relaxation and fully receives, and they're not gripping and crawling and grasping all over each other, because what that is often is like pressing the gas and the brake at the same time. And the sort of the template that we have from in the West of boys being trained in the locker room to go from first base to second base to third base to home, and then this notion of tearing each other's clothes off, and the intensity is in the fierceness and the passion of like it getting over very fast, and it being this sort of a real chaotic mess where you're not slowing the fuck down to make it into a more I should say a more balanced experience. So how many people do you know that they give each other separate head to toe full body massages with whatever massage skills they have, which doesn't take going to massage school, just like paint them with your fingers with coconut oil from head to toe, with some music on, whatever floats your boat, and some incense if you like that, and something to sort of set that mood. And because what we're doing is we're bringing attention, steeping the physical body in consciousness and attention, and that takes time, like marinating something. So if you imagine if just taking a turkey, right, and just slapping the juice on it, and then trying to eat it, it wouldn't even be on there. Like there'd be a couple of drops left, but most of it would just be like on the plate or, wherever, so on the table. But if you marinate something, then you have the real flavor seeping deep into the tissue. And that's what the meditative practices help with. And even if, like you said, just watching it happen, what you're going to see if you Google tantric porn, you're going to see people taking turns, fully surrendering and allowing that love energy to steep into the flesh, so that by the time you actually come into union with intercourse, the man, most importantly, the man has these energetic centers, the chakras, the higher chakras, actually dilated and open and able to sustain the Shakti energy, that flow of orgasmic energy from the woman, so it doesn't blow him out. Because I'll tell you, 1,000,000 times in my life, I could think I've got my game down and I'm on my A game, and I've got my breath going, and I've got my orgasm under control, and I'm circulating the energy, and then one little twitch or one little sweet peep from her, and I'm gone. And the switch is flipped, and I have we call the ejaculatory sneeze response, where you beyond the point of no return, and you can't control it. So it's like the more effort is put into just by whatever means, and it could be people, whatever you want to do, slap each other, tie each other up, all that good stuff, and then the people who do that, they really are tantric without claiming it, if they don't claim it. And that's just bringing more attention and bringing your full consciousness in, and really eliminating the mind chatter. Because if you're making love and you can't stop thinking about your to-do list, your shopping list, what's stressing you out, then you haven't achieved what meditation is hoping to achieve, and is that stillness of mind and that silence of mind chatter, so that you can really luxuriate in this vibration of orgasm. And it becomes a continuum. And some people would say, they've had orgasms that just can extend throughout a whole week, and they're on cloud nine. So levitation in a very emotional sense is easy to attain with these practices.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is it's bringing the idea of mindfulness and presence to sex.
Yes.
Which is really missing, I think, in a lot of our sexual experiences. And it's missing from...
It's weird that it is, don't you think? I mean, just talking about this, it's like, wow, we really are completely disconnected from that in the modern world.
Right.
Yeah, and not only with sex, but also with other pleasurable experiences. For example, it's like the difference between taking your time to put on some music and cook a nice dinner, and like lovingly chopping up all the vegetables, and making the meal include every color of the rainbow, and then putting it all on the table and smelling it before you take that first bite, and then chewing everything, versus microwaving some hot dogs, sitting down and plopping down in front of the TV, putting on Netflix, and then zoning out in front of the screen while you absentmindedly shove bites into your mouth.
You got it. That's it. There's a slow food movement. You could call this the slow sex movement. Exactly.
Wow, that's totally what it is. It is a slow sex movement.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question about
Sure.
Okay, so what's up with the sex magicking? Do I change the price of Bitcoin by properly performing sex? What kind of magical?
That sounds great.
Yeah.
What kind of magic tricks can I expect? And is this like a thing that the average person can use, or is that when you need to use incantations? And do you really think that you're creating actual magic, or is that something that people are just like, oh man, it's so magical? Or are you, you know what I mean? Can you give me a little bit of clarity around that? Wow.
Sure. Well, I'm glad you touched on really some of the most important definitions and sort of categories of magic. Everything from a magic trick, which is like sleight of hand and somebody using just a sort of some sort of tactic or trick to manipulate people. And there's certainly a lot of that happens that we need to be aware of and on guard against. And then there is, on the more genuine spectrum, the notion that you can actually alter future events and you can actually alter the fabric of reality on a quantum level with your intention and with your will. And so when that book, The Secret, came out and Oprah was talking about it and everyone was talking about the law of attraction and manifestation, and everyone was saying like, you just need to really I guess we could define magic. I would define it as energizing your will, which in that will is symbolized in some sort of altar, some sort of image, some sort of phrase. So in sex magic, you don't have to follow the incantations of a previous spiritual tradition in some other language. You don't have to bust out a grimoire or a tantric scripture. You could actually just say, okay, I want to, something as simple as, you want a new car? Give it some detail, define it in your mind, and you could by yourself or with a partner or in a group, literally just shout out some phrase that encapsulates or that crystallizes that desire at the peak of orgasm, and watch what happens and see if the universe starts to conspire in a pronoia, not paranoia, but a pronoic way. You start to see how things are rigged in your favor when you sort of, I say, if the gods are answering prayers, the way to get your prayer to the top of the stack on their desktop is to scream it at the highest peak of orgasm as loud as you can, and that will get you to the front of the line. And so so that it's that simple. And so I've had, I will tell you this, sex magic rituals that I performed almost 10 years ago, I'm still light years away from catching up to the avalanche of opportunity and blessing and boons that came to me from those rituals. So like, I'm even afraid to do more because I feel like I haven't worked my way through what was already given to me. I'm still trudging through the sort of like gold mine. It's like, oh, you want all your dreams to come true? Well, here's the pathways. And I would even say, the way that I've gotten into crypto and the blessings that have come from that have been fruits of that labor of prayer and meditation and sex magic. And it just gets better and better. But the most important thing is to have a clean slate within yourself so that you're not contaminating that vision. Because if you're hateful, if you're greedy, if you are jealous, if you are wishing harm to anyone or anything, consciously or unconsciously, and you are energizing that with sexual energy, you are now a super powerful black magician working in the dark side of the force, and you will have hell to pay for that. And I know demon invoking sex magician stripper friends of mine who have told me, when I was younger, I dabbled in this sex magic demon invocation stuff, and I would literally contract with entities on the astral plane to go and do my bidding and be like astral assassins. And she was in league with all these sort of demonic gangsters. And then she said, after years, man, it was like racking up a karmic credit card, and now I'm in huge debt, and now my life is falling apart. I'm getting sick. It's crumbling. So that's a skilled magician who is doing the stuff consciously. Now think about an unskilled magician, which we all are, whether we like it or know it or not. It's not like you say, I'm not a magician because I don't say I am. You are a magician because you are a human being, and you have a will, and you have a body, and you are embodied, and you can do things on the physical plane in concert with things on the non-physical plane or the astral plane. And therefore we have everything we see in our world is the product of creation, co-creation with the astral and the quantum layers of the stack of reality. Like, we are on this app level of a stack of being and talking in this language. There's so many cryptographic primitives, if you will, below us, beneath us, that have evolved over time. And really, that's why the modern world does not want us to study these deeper levels of the stack, the ancient mystical knowledge of how to harness this energy and the harmony and the discipline that's required to maintain this, some people would say a very narrow path. Like, if you want to, and in Tantra, they call it a left-hand path and a right-hand path. And the right-hand path of Tantra, or the white Tantra versus red Tantra, is the notion that those who are less adventurous, they're more risk averse, their risk appetite is lower, they're going to stick to the symbolic versions of Tantra. They're not going to have the sexual rituals. They're not going to do the transgressive rituals because they're not willing to risk, the danger of what happens when you do start to program reality with your sexual energy. And that's more of a assertive left-hand path kind of a thing. So I would say that it's creepier and creepier the more you peel this onion and see that, like sociopathic, narcissistic, manipulative, all those fucking top Bitcoiner whales that are fucking with the price and just dick waving on Twitter and all of this bullshit. Like, to me, they're so uncooked spiritually. It's sad. And I'm hoping that some of them will hear this and want to like get more on board with their feminine side and with ethical magic, because they're just spewing so much toxic hatred. And in that conversation with Vin, we talk about fake Toshi, and fake Toshi being this hyper egoic, just complete, absolute, extreme pendulum of power and ego and narcissism. And I don't see, when these guys get in these dick waving pissing contest battles, they never want to back down an inch. They never want to shed a tear. They never want to admit they were wrong. And it just cascades until we're all in ashes in the smoldering cinder on earth. And I'm sick of it. And it's, and the divine forces that I would say in my mythology that I've experienced, there is a benevolent divine mother goddess energy that would love to see us mature and evolve and appreciate these gifts of embodiedness that we have, and take care of the garden planet and make love again in this what Terence McKenna said, we all just would like to be naked, stoned, and exalted in the jungle, and being very content with our bodies and the technology of orgasm, and mastering that, and getting away from the poisons and the toxins and the empires and the technologies that are, really separating us and making us lose clarity on what we're here to potentially do, which is, ascend up to these more graceful states. And so I'm a believer, and I think you can't go wrong if you think about masturbate while watching Star Wars, I guess is
that's the message. All right. Well, Ben, we're running short on time, but we have one more very important question that we need to get to, because we teased it at the beginning of the show and we need to pay the tease. So Tatiana, Go for it.
What's up with the female ejaculation? Is this a myth? And how can more men make it happen for more ladies? What's the scoop?
It is absolutely very real, and it is the most holy and most divine experience that anybody on earth, any human on earth can participate in. And in the tantric scriptures, it's called amrita, meaning the nectar of the goddess. And so to access that is a skill set that is absolutely vital to any of these expert practices. You want to actually understand the anatomy of the female vagina, which has in it this it's called the G spot in the Western clinical sense. And if you look that up, of course, you get all of the anatomical mappings of it, and you get the sort of scientific literature about how there's a cluster of nerves there. But in the more magical sense, in the more esoteric sense, it's called the sacred spot. And what has been discovered in the course of the centuries of practicing Tantra is that if you were to do the sort of come hither motion with one or two fingers, your index and your middle finger, or your middle and your ring finger, as the giver or the practitioner, you would be gently, with permission, slowly working your way with massage of the whole pelvis into reaching inside and curling the fingers upward towards the belly, and then gently and sometimes more intensely, if desired, stroking that G-spot area for literally 30 minutes or more. And with that intensive effort that anybody can do anytime, and there are obviously toys that are designed with the shape so that women can do this for themselves, but it's always better to be able to fully relax and have someone administer this. And so there's a lot of what people are doing in Tantra, and what Tantra has become in the West really famous for is the replicating that procedure and allowing women to squirt. So there's a joke about how you better have a plastic sheet, plastic under your sheets and a stack of towels, because literally liters upon liters can be generated in that process. And then there's,
wow.
Yeah.
And you don't think it's pee, because some people think that it's pee.
That is a myth that is actually extremely traumatizing. And I've had female lovers who've said that they're afraid to let themselves experience full pleasure, because the first time it happened with a lover, they were having the fucking absolute time of their life. And the fucking douchebag yelled at them saying, "Bitch, you pissed on me." And so they're ruined unless they do deep healing work for the rest of their life, to be afraid of really writing all of the pleasure. And they're holding back and contracting the whole fucking time for the rest of their life. So that is
very traumatic.
Total tragedy. Yeah. So like, men listening to this, it's not pee. Say it with me again. It's not pee.
It's not pee.
Yeah. And if it was, it's the best and greatest and most luxurious golden shower you'll ever have. So shut the fuck up about it. And you don't have to drink it if you don't want to. But here's the secret. This is like the trick of the trade here, is that, and this is an ancient wisdom as well, is that if you want to have no equivocation about it, then just empty your bladder before the session, and then you will know. But the sensation for women is very much that you feel like your bladder is full. You feel like you're going to pee. It is going through the tubing. There is going to be remnants of it. But then I say to men too, it's like, well, you want a woman to suck your dick that you piss out of, so fuck you. So, there's going to be, but with the man, there's the pre-cum, that sort of bathes the urethra to prevent the acid from killing the sperm. And I just say that go with the flow, and really it makes sense you want to be hydrated, but you also should, if you can, empty your bladder, knowing you're going to go into this. But it can happen spontaneously, and the sexual position that's most conducive to it is, quote, doggy style, where you are, the shape of the penis, the way that it is penetrating, is able to actually directly go pretty much straight to the G-spot. So that's where to start if you want to add that dimension and be sure you're hitting it from the with the penis through intercourse. But and
it's not like when you say stroking or massaging the sacred spot, it's not just like jackhammering it.
No.
It's like pressure and then drag towards you, right?
Mm-hmm,
like push on it and then drag it. It's like a come here, like this motion of curling your finger. Come here.
Exactly. Yeah. And it pretty much, I mean, the thing that it's gotten really big in porn, and it's kind of become the thing that I would say it's better to the less goal oriented you are in these practices, the more the magic flows, the more easily it flows. It's almost like if you were trying to, the harder you try to do something, the more difficult it becomes, because you're not relaxed and you're not just practicing the skill that you've worked towards. So that I think when people say, I want to do this, I want to have this, and then there's like a setup of disappointment. And a lot of men who are just trying to just give a regular orgasm to a woman, if they're both really overthinking it and overdoing it and just too focused on one objective, then really it's shy. The female orgasm it can be very shy, but when it feels warm and welcome, it can be very boisterous and very much like a burlesque. The vibe of the female orgasmic response, it just needs to be really given space to come out and be a rock star and make it rain. And but that takes some time.
Now, I've even heard of I've heard the opposite stories. I've heard some of the stories that say women hold back because they're afraid of their fluids or their smell or their taste, or they're just generally feeling internalizing shame about their body that they've heard
Right.
from culture or other people. And then I've heard the opposite stories where women feel pressure to squirt, even if that's not really natural for them. And so they fake it, or they pretend to, or something like that, or they learn to do it on command. And that to me doesn't seem very, healthy or spiritually healthy, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And so, like, what about this idea or this pressure of, faking orgasms rather than just saying, "Hey, I'd like to stop now"?
Yeah, that is the huge, I think that's where Tantra has done the most triage for people in the West, is that there's actually a movie that I recommend everybody watch. It's called Bliss, and it's from 1997. It has a beautiful story and beautiful list of some A-list actors, but basically it's probably the absolute best cinematic production of the entire really essence of the teachings of Tantra for sexual healing and for male sexual mastery and for female anorgasmia, which is, I guess, the clinical term for having difficulty having orgasm, if at all. But they go over that and very deeply, and it has a funny sort of scene in there where the two guys who think they have it all dialed in with their A game in the bedroom, and they both commiserate about how their lovers are faking it, and it's just really troubling. It's just that fragile male ego. You don't want to ask for directions when you're driving. You don't want to ask for directions when you're fucking. Okay, we get it. Like, how do we solve that problem, and how do you be humbled enough? And what's great about, I think, the tantric teachings of all things is that when you are trained to see your beloved as the divine goddess, and you are trained to worship and bow down to her as though she is the divine deity, then that is that quality that opens everything up on that subtle level, and the orgasms just flow when that energy is there. And but you still, like, that, it's not about being her BDSM slave who is a servile, larval sort of slug who has no masculine power and is not a god. Like, you want to be a god who, I mean, that's the whole idea. Like, when we had these mythologies and cosmologies of the universe being born of the love of a masculine and feminine co-creative parents, like, that's the problem. We lost Mrs. God, and we have this ascetic, and this is where people might disagree with me and get offended and outraged, but I'm sorry, like, Jesus is not, we are not told about what Jesus was doing in ritual ceremonies with Mary, who wasn't even a prostitute, but if she was, that wouldn't bother me. But there's a whole esoteric mythology around what was encoded in the Bible, and how that there were mystical sexual practices behind all of these things. And really the gift of finding Tantra in the West is that, well, wait a minute, if we can flip the script on creation and say that we are all the products of a divine procreative energy exchange between these cosmic forces that sort of cascades down into our crude physical biological material of genitals and of reproductive organs, if we trace that back to these primordial, deep, ancient cosmic forces, then when we bring that to the bedroom, it's actually in reenactment. So in the tantric ritual, what we're saying is that we are here tonight to reenact the birth of the cosmos, the conception of life and matter and energy and spirit. We're going to recreate that and reenact it. And we're like cosplayers of God and Goddess, I guess you could put it that way. And when you do that, and when you bring that, that's orgasm. You see, orgasm is the eternal, ultimate realized state of consciousness. And that when we just sort of bump into it and have these little sharp peak moments of acute access to the orgasmic energy field, we have a genital sneeze, a clitoral sneeze with a Hitachi, or a guy jerking off to porn, and you have like just a nanosecond of a glimpse of the orgasmic field, which is an AKA enlightenment. But when you do these practices and the devotional, that's where I do say you can do the practical stuff, but there is a quality that comes with worship that is very real and very deep. And if we are, and I think I'm skeptical too, believe me, I consider myself extremely atheistic. I was not going to be bowing down. I'm an anarchist, no gods, no masters, no fucking way. But I also was throwing the baby out with the holy water and not knowing any of this stuff. But this is, you can have your cake and eat it too with Tantra. You can be spiritual and you can be sexy, and no one's going to tell you. I mean, to me, there's 2 rules in life: no children, no animals, and then figure out the rest.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for sharing all of this knowledge with our audience and for talking with us and answering our questions. I definitely learned a lot from this show, and I really appreciate you sharing this with us. Where can people find out more about you? I know you do coaching also if someone wants to work with you, and you also have a podcast, which is surprisingly probably like the most relevant podcast you could imagine to our audience, because you're talking about sex. You're also talking about crypto. So tell us about that.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Yes. Well, you've been a guest also on the podcast, and I was so stoked that I could reach out to you. And so please do go back and Balancing Wellness and Technology with crypto commentator Stephanie Murphy, I believe was the title of that show. And so please do look that up. And thank you for doing your podcast, the Sex and Science Hour. That was how I felt it was appropriate to bridge the gap, and to connect with you. I had been a fan of Let's Talk Bitcoin and, of course, the Tatiana show, and I've been a devotee of worshiping, that feed. It's one of the highlights of my week. So thank you all. We're all just doing that good work. And for me, my website is tantrapunk.com. TANTRAPUNK.com, and there you can find my videos, my music, my podcast, and I'm really interested in the intersections of crypto and sexuality and feminism and ecology, and I really feel like the goddess is expressing herself very brilliantly through these devs, and I think it's also no pun intended that the devs and the devis and the devas, I always get a kick out of thinking about how these are the programmers of our reality now. These are the new clergy. They're the priests and priestess class. And before, if it was Sanskrit, and before, if it was the Hebrew languages, now we're talking about solidity code gods and goddesses. So I'm doing my best to try to help there be a cross-pollination of energy. And I think we all know that the Bitcoin douchebaggery at the high level really, you could call it divine feminine goddess energy, or you could just call it compassion, or you could call it just emotional intelligence. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Great. Well, Ben, thank you so much for being on Proof of Love. This has been an awesome episode, and you can find us at proofoflovecast.com if you have questions about tantric sex or about anything else that you want to talk about, or if you have a suggestion for us, a guest, you can contact us through proofoflovecast.com. Make sure to like our page on Facebook. We're posting special content there, pictures and show announcements and everything like that, all kinds of good stuff. So we want to connect with you, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you so much for listening to Proof of Love.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes, much love. Take care.
Much love. Yes.
Show me your heart. I know that it's beating. Tell me that you love me too. So I know your heart is true. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. Thank you for listening to Proof of Love. Please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Proof of Lovecast. More episodes can be found at proofoflovecast.com. And make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. Proof of Love has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond.